if we get through those, and we probably will. Let's start with Congress as a whole. Who was that? Go ahead.
I just feel like there's so much fighting and bickering, and there's so much pork barrel spending, and negotiating with all of that kind of crap. They're not really taking care of business for the nation.
We get your name and where you're from, please.
I'm Karen Johnson from here in Caroll.
Yeah. Thank you. And I'll let you guys give your name. I don't want to ask everybody. So you please say. Okay. And I don't even know who he is, so I'm not on my side. Okay. I think that you have a legitimate point of view that you made. Number one, though, elections have some consequences, and one of the consequences of the last election was that there isn't going to be any earmarks this year or next year. Now, after you elect a new Congress, things could change, but there's no earmarks for this year or last year. The bickering that goes on is probably more in the House of Representatives than in the Senate. Let me explain why. Because in the House of Representatives, and I don't say that because I'm a senator, it's just the way the institutions are different. A Democrat majority or a Republican majority, as long as they stick together, they can ignore the minority. Just simply ignore it. And go ahead as long as they stick together and they can pass anything they want to pass. But in the Senate, except for the last 2 years prior to now when there were 60 of one political party, then one political party can do almost anything it wants to in the Senate. But 30 years before that, and now, the Senate was divided one way or the other inside 55-45. So when it takes 60 votes to get anything done, you've got to have some bipartisanship or nothing's going to get done. And everybody knows something has to get done. Not everything has to get done, but something has to get done. So I'll leave you with this, unless I didn't adequately answer your question, with the fact that because controversy makes news in Washington. If you're getting the news from television, news reports, and cable, and all that sort of stuff where they always want to talk about controversial stuff, you're going to see probably more controversy than really exists in Washington. And I'll give you an example. The last 10 years prior to this year, I was either chairman of the Finance Committee or ranking Republican on the Finance Committee. I've used up my term, so I have to move to another committee. But during that 10 years, and I'll give more credit to the Democrat than me because this was his idea, Senator Baucus said to me, why don't we meet once a week to decide what we can do together? And so we started meeting in 2001, see what we could do together. And the 10 years that he or I were leading that committee, and we were all, each year we were head of our respective Republican and Democrat members of that committee. All but 4 or 5 bills got out of committee and were bipartisan. But see, when Chuck Grassley and Senator Baucus get along, you ain't going to hear about it. But if we were fighting every day, you'd hear about it. So I just think you got to remember that there might be some distortion of a view you have. But your view is not incorrect. It just could be distorted a little bit from the real world in Washington, at least in the Senate.
It just seems like it's far left and far right, and there's not very many in the middle willing to cooperate. They all want their own way, and they're not working for the good of the nation.
In the House of Representatives, that would be absolutely true. There's some of that in the Senate, but remember, nothing would get done if you didn't have, right now you have 53 Democrats, and you have 47 Republicans. Well, for something to get through the Senate, you've got to have bipartisanship, or you're never going to get 60 votes. And by the way, I didn't explain it, but in the House of Representatives, they have limit on debate, see? So when they decide they're going to have a 3-hour debate, they have a 3-hour debate, and they decide how many amendments they're going to have. Then when they're done with that, they vote. But in the United States Senate, you don't stop debate if you don't have at least 60 votes. So that's where the bipartisanship comes in. So if you don't have 60 votes, then you sit down with people of the other political party and say, how can we change this bill to make it more palatable so we can get to the end of it? See? So the institution forces compromise, except when one political party's got 60 votes, you know. But that doesn't happen very often.
Can I ask a question related to that?
Yeah.
What happened to Speaker Boehner when the discussion on the cap, on the ceiling was going on? What happened to Speaker Boehner, who had nonpartisan support for what he was going to try to do, and at the last minute there was partisan?
Yeah, what happened there was that 83 new members were elected to Congress, hadn't ever been in Congress before, and they decided they had a mandate to be tougher than what Boehner wanted to be. And they said to Boehner, you aren't doing enough. We got to do more. And they said, that's the platform we ran on. Okay, let's go to corporate loophole. Who's that?
Senator, I'm just kind of concerned about the fact that your voting record on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid really is sort of undermining a basic safety net that people need, and yet you are willing to protect corporate tax loopholes. I want to tell you a story. I have an 89-year-old mother, and I have an 86-year-old aunt who both are dependent on Social Security. They live on about $1,400 a month. They were working women. But back in the day when they were working, there wasn't much of a pension plan for them. They get about $600 a month from their pension, and they get $800 in their Social Security benefit. And when they go on the loophole, now they're taking money out of the meager savings accounts that they had, and they're very frugal people. These women grew up in the Depression. What are you going to do to protect Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
Name and where you're from, please.
My name is Sheree Morris-East, and I'm from Des Moines, Iowa, and I'm taking 3 hours out of my day to come over here, Senator.
Well, first of all, I want to preserve Medicare and Social Security. And the reason for preserving it is that it's part of the social fabric of our country. Not only is it a government program, both of them, but if you work for a big corporation, you'll probably find that your retirement plan for health care, for early retirement, when you get to be 65, is dovetailed in with Medicare. Like if you were a John Deere employee, you'd probably find out if you took early retirement that your retirement plan would be 100% corporate, but after you became 62, it would be part of Social Security and full-time Social Security and whatever the supplement was that the corporation gave you. So it isn't just a case of preserving a government program. It's that it's part of the social fabric that's interweaved with a lot of private sector things as well. The facts are, not based upon what I say, but the trustees that meet every year, and they look ahead 75 years, they always update 75 years ahead, they will tell you after 2021 that after 2021 there's not going to be any Part A hospitalization plan because it's trust fund's going to go out. So we know that. Now if you would say to me, don't touch my Medicare, just leave it alone, you'd be saying after 2021 you don't have any Medicare. So what are we going to do between now and then? And the sooner you do it, the better. Preserve Medicare, because I think Medicare ought to be preserved. And I want to be a part of that. But it's going to have to be bipartisan. And it will really help if a president will lead, because a president's got to sign something that we pass, and nobody's probably going to want to get into this deeply unless you know that the president's on board and wants to sign it. Now the president, in his health care reform bill, took $500 and some billion out of Medicare to finance the health care bill. That doesn't sound to me to be very Medicare friendly. You know, Medicare is
Either privatized.
Medicare generally.
What I'm really asking is, when is Wall Street going to pay their fair share? That's really what my question is about, I think.
Oh, I thought your question was about saving Medicare.
It was,
Well, then
how are you going to close tax loopholes for corporations?
Oh, well, that's easy to do. Yeah, it is easy to do. The reason it's easy to do is because the United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the world. In the last 10 years, the world has moved from a 32% average corporate tax rate down to 25, or a little bit lower. We still have it at 35. So we're very economically uncompetitive. So closing the loopholes is this simple. When we decide that we're going to reduce the marginal tax rate for corporations down to 25, so we can be competitive in the international world, because we're in an international economy. We got to compete, and when you compete, you create jobs in America. Anyway, we close the corporate loopholes and do what we, and another way of saying that, you broaden the tax base, then you reduce the marginal tax rate. And we ought to be doing the same thing for individuals as well. Let's see. Let's go to, you brought up Medicaid.
I'm Rhonda Mart. I'm the director here at New Hope, and I had the opportunity to tour with Senator Grassley before today's town hall meeting, and to share with him the significant challenges that the individuals that we support face. Some of the things that we didn't get to talk about, Senator, are double-digit increases to our employee health insurance program, the workforce shortage in rural Iowa. We're heavily competing for employees here in Caroll, and we are facing an increase in the severity of the individuals that we serve. Adequate Medicaid funding is necessary for us to sustain a workforce that's able to make a living wage. Many of our employees have 2 or 3 jobs to make a living. And so I want to ask you to support Medicaid for Iowans with disabilities. But my question is this: Medicaid has often been referred to as an unsustainable entitlement program, and I want to hear your thoughts and that you have on how to make it sustainable.
Well, it's probably more sustainable from the federal level than it is from the state level, because the federal government, and it varies from 50% up to 78%. For wealthy states, the federal match might be 50%, and in Iowa, it's about 62 or 63%, I believe. And so a lot of the problems you bring up would be dependent upon what the state government did. Because we kind of have I hate to say this because it sounds very fiscally irresponsible, but we kind of have an open checking account at the federal government for Medicaid. There are a few mandated services that the federal government says states have to offer, but there's a multitude of other services that only the state determines who's eligible and who can get what and what's going to be offered and what they're going to pay for. So if the state of Iowa says we're going to save X number of dollars on Medicaid, and they save 37 cents out of that dollar, we're saving 63 cents. If they decide that they're going to offer a new service or beef up a service, they're going to kick in 37 cents, we're going to kick in 63 cents. So I think, at least immediately, you got to think in terms of what the states require or not require, except for what is coming down the road over the next 3 or 4 years under the President's health care reform plan. That will put 18 million more people on Medicaid. I think by raising the percentage of eligibility, poverty level individual. And that's going to be financed by 90% by the federal government until the year 2018. Then it's going to be financed by state government, I think, the same way as other programs are. But I think that that's kind of a false sense of health care for some people that are going to be of those 18 million people that go on Medicare, because you know, I should have said Medicaid. Medicaid only pays about 65% of costs. And so there's a lot of doctors, even today, don't take Medicaid patients, okay? You put another 18 million people on there, and they may say, well, finally, I'm going to have health care insurance. It could be a false sense, a false promise, if you don't have doctors that can serve them. So I would caution about that. And then, of course, if the President's health care reform bill would be declared unconstitutional, or if a new president would be elected, then, of course, that 18 million wouldn't be a burden for the states. And even though only, you might not think 10% is a burden, but most governors say it's really quite a burden. And Medicaid is becoming bigger than anything else. So I imagine, but I haven't been involved in any discussions on this, but I would imagine that this fall Medicaid could be up for discussion based upon, now I don't expect everybody to see this chart, but it's money that's spent in the federal budget. And you've talked about some savings that have been made so far. This is called non-defense discretionary, 16%. Most of the savings that you've read about this year has come out of that 16%. A little bit out of defense discretionary, but Medicare and Medicare make up 24%, and Social Security makes up 20%. So you see the extent to which you touch or don't touch this 44%, and none of it's been touched at this point. You know, you could eliminate all of these, you could eliminate all this program and you still have a big budget deficit. If you eliminated all these, you're talking about thousands of programs, see? So there may be these things, well, not Social Security, but Medicare and Medicaid may be up for discussion between now and November, when this super committee of 12 people that are supposed to reduce the deficit make an agreement. I'll go on now. Let's see. Let's go to fast and furious.
Yeah. I'm Duke Hannaford, local MD, tired and retired. Caroll. Welcome.
I'm glad to be with you.
And I can remember 2 years ago you were over in Glidden when you had a Caroll County Town Hall meeting. And I was real worried then because the gun grabbers had both control of both houses in the White House, and my right to possess and bear my semi-automatic Browning shotgun to open the dove season Thursday was in jeopardy by 1 point in the Supreme Court. You remember that? And I looked you in the eyes, and you promised me that you'd keep your eyes open in the middle of the night if the gun grabbers were sneaking in amendments, etc., to take my Second Amendment rights away. And you keep your promise, because I've been following this fast and furious, this Senate investigation that you've headed up in the Judiciary Committee, and you and Representative Weiss are doing a good job there, because even the gun dealers down in the border states, they knew something stuck on that, and they called the Justice Department. They said, "Oh, it's okay, go right ahead, sell it to those straw boys." And that thing stinks. My opinion is, and an opinion of many other people for your Second Amendment rights, is that this was from the highest levels in our government, clear into the White House. They knew about this, and it was an program to ram through further restrictions on my right to possess and bear arms, even a semi-automatic. They're going to take that away. You remember 12, 15 years ago, semi-automatic shotgun was included in the assault rifles. And I'm sure glad that you were on top of that. And there was, I'm going to have to say that I'm real you about this Fast and Furious, and I got a letter, 2-page letter back, and I appreciate that a lot. And I appreciate if you continue that investigation, I think they posted by letter.
Well, that's why I said at the beginning of this meeting, if anybody doesn't get an answer to the letter, write me an answer letter, ask me why I didn't answer your letter. Because if I brag about answering your letter, I'm not a liar, I don't want to keep my word, but quite frankly, when you get more than 200,000 communications over the course of a year, something's going to fall through the cracks. And that's why I invite people to tell me if I didn't answer the letter.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yeah.
I don't care how many automatic weapons they have or semi-automatic weapons. They're dove hunting. They're not welcome on my damn farm.
Name and town, please. Name and town, please.
Mary Janet Rhodes, Iowa.
Name and town.
Okay.
Keep your guns out of my place.
Let's go to the person that says Social Security, Medicare. You want two separate subjects or one subject? Is that you?
Yeah, I said Social Security.
Go ahead.
My name is Rosemary Partridge. My husband and I have a business in Caroll County, right across the line. We live in Sac County. We live about 18 miles northwest of here. And my question is about Social Security, funding of Social Security. My question is, why can't we raise the wage cap in order to ensure that Social Security can continue on as it is without talking about cutting it, without talking about it? And if we, as a business, we would have some people that would be giving more to that, especially actually a family member that's part ownership of the business. And the business would pay more too. And you know what? No complaints. We want to have Social Security.
Well, I think when it comes to Social Security, that if anybody's going to bargain in good faith, you got to have everything on the table.
Right.
But if your point of view is that you can solve the Social Security problem just by taking the cap off, that isn't going to solve it as the trustees look at 75 years. But there would be some additional income coming in besides whatever you wanted to do there. But the real reason Social Security is in trouble is because in 1936, nobody saw people living much beyond age 65. And so today, when you're 65, or now it's 66, and you retire, you paid in and your employer's paid in, and the interest on it will pay you back in about, if you're an average person, about 7 years. But you're going to live another 10 years. So who makes, yeah, I hope you do too. So who makes that up for 10 years? Or in the case of Medicare, the average person throughout a lifetime pays in about $110,000 or $120,000. But the health care that seniors get on average is about $300,000 a year. And quite frankly, most of that's spent in the last year of their life. And so, when you look at what people thought in 1966 in the case of Medicare, and in 1936 in the case of Social Security, how long people would live, or how expensive health care might be, or the fact that we had all these great health care advancements, those weren't anticipated 40 years ago and 70 years ago. So whatever was set up as taxes and eligibility for retirement, and and what people would get every year as an increase in these things, nobody really anticipated that. So what Congress is in the quandary now of how do you make up for the inability of people in my position 40 years ago and 70 years ago to know exactly what the future held for them.
Well, I think the reason that they're in such a quandary is because there's been a vow made that no taxes of any kind should be raised, and you can't have social programs without some funding. Not just cut them and cut them. It would be very unfair and unwise to cut these social programs, to cut Social Security, to cut Medicare, Medicaid. We're a better country than that. I live in a better country than that.
A Do you have a follow-up to that? Because I want to stay on my list. But if you have a follow-up, I don't want to, if we can stay on the same.
Raise the age.
What?
The lady said raise the age.
I didn't say raise the age.
She said raise the wage cap.
The wage, there's a wage cap.
But all the following countries around us in the international democracy that we're trying to make is lowering their age of retirement, except the United States. How come ours is raising from 65 to 70 to make our people work longer?
No. I can only answer your question that in the case of France and Greece, you're wrong. France is raising their age, I don't know whether it's from 62 to 65 or from 60 to 60. And Germany is helping bail out Greece, and all the people in Germany can't retire until they're 65, and those taxpayers are wondering, why should we put money in Greece when you retire at age 55? It's just stupid, the Germans think. So not everybody is doing that, and states are looking at increasing, our own states are looking at changing some of their retirement ages as well, and going from maybe a state retirement plan to a 401k as an example. Let's go to,
Wait, I have a question on that,
okay,
Senator.
go ahead.
My name is Ken Bowen. I live in Winterset, Iowa, part of Madison County.
Yeah.
And your comment just now about possibly converting Social Security to a 401k.
No, I didn't say that. I said states are thinking about converting their retirement plan. We aren't
Okay, let me, if I may, sir, if I may.
But I thought I ought to correct you that I didn't say that, and I'm not for 401k.
All right, but the idea of privatizing Social Security, I have a story about that, very brief.
Okay, go ahead.
When I retired in 2008, I took my company pension and put it into an IRA and 401k plan, and that was in April. I rolled it over. By October, that entire pension was gone because the stock market went south on me. And if that had been my Social Security, sir, I wouldn't even have that, or not as much of it. And I would be expected to live on whatever the stock market leaves me. I don't think that's quite right when someone like Warren Buffett could lose half of his income and still be better off than I am with my full income. I want to know what you're going to do to strengthen Social Security to make it so that we don't ever have to worry about whether or not the stock market is going to go south, the banks get bailed out, and I get nothing. Thank you.
First of all, I've already answered the first question. Everything's on the table. Secondly, I only know of one member of Congress out of 535, and I won't name him, but I only know of one member out of 535 who want to privatize Social Security. Let's go to the Farm Bill.
That was George Bush's presidency, sir.
Who? He's not president now.
Thank God.
Yeah, if you want to talk about Medicare, go ahead. Then we'll do the Farm Bill next.
My name is Sharon Gruber. I'm a retired teacher. Gruber,
Yeah.
like in Peanuts. I'm a retired teacher. I've paid my insurance. Never had to dip into it until I retired. And then I had 2 heart operations. If you go to privatizing Medicare, I appreciate the stand you took against the death panels, but you had the wrong party. The death panels are the insurance companies who say you can't have insurance anymore because you have chronic disease. You can't have this treatment because we won't cover this treatment. That's what you're going to put us back to if you put us back to privatizing, giving us vouchers for Medicare. And we can't afford to have that happen. I did think that maybe there was some misinformation or not complete. When you say about the, I can't read, 600 million was it, that was taken out of?
500 and some billion.
Yeah, almost 600 billion. That was taken from the Medicare Advantage program, which was subsidizing insurance companies.
Right.
This is not coming from Medicare.
You're right.
No, on your background, Senator, that you would fully support that, because in order to make a change that would be a cost in the affordable health care, there was money taken out of health care. I mean, isn't that what you're wanting to have happen? And isn't the panel supposed to be finding those things where there's fraud in Medicare? Don't we want people finding the fraud in Medicare? And that's what the panel is about. That's in the Medicare bill. It's supposed to cut the cost. That's why it's called the affordable health care bill.
But the extent, they're not really zeroing in on fraud. They're supposed to make determinations on care that doctors and hospitals will give, plus what they're going to reimburse for. And the reason why I think you have to worry about this panel being racial, or leading to racial, is because presently healthcare costs go up about 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation. And their goal is to not have healthcare costs after they kick in more than 1.5% above the rate of inflation. Okay, so where is that going to come from? That's going to come from not reimbursing doctors and hospitals, et cetera, as much. And then that's going to lead to people deciding, well, if you're over 80 years old, should you have a knee replaced? Where now today, there's no question about it.
I think, sir, but I think that what they're trying to do is move away from the fact that doctors and hospitals are paid on the procedure that's used. And for instance, I had an echo that was done 4 months ago. I have another cardiologist that's for the electronic part of my heart. And I shared that echo with that doctor and had it sent over. And then the result of that second appointment was that they wanted me to have an echo. The nurse called back and said, the doctor wants you to come in and have an echo. And I said, but I had one. Does that information suffice, or is something new come up? And I think that's what they're trying to do, is keep from having these kinds of costs, not determining whether, your doctor and the patient are there to make a decision on this. But we've got to get the fraud out of the system, because that's where a lot of the cost goes. And this is part of it. And they're looking to move away from procedures and going to outcomes, from what I understand.
And that's a very good thing to do. But they're still limited to the decisions that are making of being within 1 and 1.5% over inflation. But what you say is absolutely right, and it should be done. And not everything in the President's health care reform bill is bad.
Including the part through where it says that everybody should be a part of the system. That was your proposal some years ago. Yeah. Because the broader, we're in school districts, and if you're in a small school district, your insurance costs go like hay. And if you broaden it, then you can have reduced costs because you broaden the risk. And that's what your proposal.
But you found a lot of judges in the United States that are wiser than Grassley on that point.
Oh, well, I don't think so.
On the farm bill? Are you the farm bill guy?
Yes.
I assume you're a farmer.
Yes, I am. Okay. Kenny Snyder for the call screener in the front row.
I'm going to have to come down there a little bit to hear.
Well, the question is actually with the farm bill being debated, the 2012 starting debate on that, with times having never been better on the farm, the one commodity that we do not talk about enough is our water quality. And some of the best conservationists I feel in the world live in this county because they've learned their lesson of how to do a better job. What I don't want to happen is that Conservation Reserve Program get looked past because of the acts that could start swinging on the farm bill, especially the continuous practices that protect our water and soil. So with that, I'll more of a statement than it was a question, I guess. Conservation Reserve Program, and the continuous part of that especially.
CRP. I won't comment except because we got whole lot of other issues to go through here. But I would say, just like I told the people that are talking about Social Security, this situation we're in, everything's got to be on the table, including defense. Let's go to, who brought up paying the debt? Yes, go ahead.
I'll change my mind a little bit. I was going to tell you my story, but I think others have said their story. But what really disturbs me is that Social Security has been included in this debt thing. We have not caused the debt. We have not caused the debt in this country. It's a separate fund. And this fund goes into treasury bonds. And you owe Social Security recipients, just like you owe China or anybody else that has a treasury fund. So I do not understand. Social Security, all you're doing is paying back to the fund what you owe us. I've been paying in from age 16 to 64. And so this is, everybody keeps saying that. It really drives me crazy because we're not part of the debt.
Name and count,
Well, you're absolutely right. There's $2 7/10 trillion, I believe, already IOUs to the trust fund, and when they'll start being used, and that gets us through till 2036, thereabouts. A few years ago, it was 2041. The recession brought that down. And then the present law says that you pay benefits with the cash flow. So roughly that'd be about 75% of benefits. So knowing that and thinking our children and grandchildren deserve the same thing we do, that's why I said to this lady over here, everything needs to be on the table. But let me explain to you how 40 years ago somebody made. Oh, you understand?
I understand the
You understand about what they call the unified budget?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I won't bother you.
Yeah.
But you can see why that creates a problem. Because money's fungible. A Social Security dollar doesn't look any different than an income tax dollar. So you put them together, and then you get into this business, you know. And my job would be a heck of a lot easier if we didn't have that Social Security money in the unified budget that stood out there. Now we'd have a bigger deficit, but then you wouldn't make it look like you don't care about the future generation. Okay, let's go to Senator.
Mr. Grassley, in regard to that, can I turn to deficit?
Yeah.
My name is Jerry Jansen. I'm with Edward Jones Investments. I'm a financial advisor here in town.
Yeah.
And obviously, about a month ago, Congress was not able to agree upon a plan to reduce our financial deficit. And because of that, we saw very shortly after that, the markets did not like the plan that was put into place. And they punished individual investors because of that. And the markets went down rather substantially. Now we have the super committee that's going to be meeting, as well as Congress, that have to come to a conclusion in terms of what to do in regard to the deficit by Thanksgiving. And again, if they don't come up with a plan that the markets like, very likely investors again could be punished. Now my question is do you believe that the effect of another kaboom in the stock market that could possibly take place if we did not have a plan put in place that's going to be appropriate and apt to the markets, do you think that will have an effect upon our two parties coming together to make a good financial decision for a long-term deficit reduction plan?
Yeah. I think it's a very difficult job for 12 people. And I think the extent to which they work with other committees that have jurisdiction as well as some expertise that everybody on this 12 committee, these 12 people couldn't have. They have some of it because they serve on committees too. If they're willing to work with committees like on the Agriculture Committee, where does the Agriculture Committee feel we can save money on agriculture programs? And then with the Finance Committee on other programs as well. So the extent to which they do it, I think, is a pretty good possibility. But if they don't do it, I think they have an impossible job. Let's see.
Is that a 51 vote?
Yeah, that will be a yeah, for the lady that I explained something about 60 votes here, there's just a few things that don't take 60 votes to stop debate. And most of those are legislative. And so the law says, well, in this instance, it only takes 51 votes. So the bill we passed on August the 2nd says that when this super committee comes up, this cannot be filibustered in the Senate. It's got to pass in a certain number of days by December.
And in fact, all bills will pass with 51 except if they're filibustered. And that then requires a 60. So somebody has to force the 60 vote on every other bill that's been stalled in the Senate.
Yeah. So you do have a follow-up to that?
Yeah, I'd like
because I don't want to leave my list here, but if somebody's on the same subject, maybe you ought to take care of it.
my name's George Naylor, and I raised corn and soybeans in Greene County, and I was born here in Caroll County. The doctor that delivered me, his last name was Annenberg. I don't know if it was this doctor or your father or something. Yeah, okay. Well, anyway, the fact of the matter is that if we expect Medicare to work or Social Security or anything like that, we have to have an economy that works. And it seems to me like our politicians have been in office for so many years, have really been just in the business of covering up how our economy actually works. I'll tell you a story. I was in a line to get on an airplane in Paris, France, and the person standing next to me was from Malaysia, who was a business person. And he says, well, it would be crazy for any business in the United States not to move their manufacturing to China. He says every one of their states has an office, and they will compete against every other state in getting your company to move the manufacturing to their state. They will set up all the licenses, all the labor, they will help you build a building, the whole works. So while our big business in this country says that we ought to be for a free market and we want the government out of the economy, the fact of the matter is that our big businesses have a partnership with the government of China to take our jobs from here over there so that our wages stagnate over here so that we're not paying as much into Social Security and Medicare as we should be. So no wonder they're not funding. No wonder we have a deficit. So anyway, until you change that, and you could throw in Freedom to Farm. Let's look at what Freedom to Farm did, which is a farm program that he supported, Senator Grassley, which let the price of corn and soybeans and livestock go so cheap that we got rid of a lot of good farmers and cut out a lot of economic activity in our communities and put most of that economic activity into vertically integrated corporations. So if you don't deal with the most basic thing and if you don't quit covering up how our big corporations are just taking the guts out of our country, then you can't expect any of our programs to work, and you can't expect any of the solutions that politicians like you, and regardless of what party, that they'll actually work.
Who brought up Department of Defense?
I did. My name's Don Burns. I'm a retired Chief Petty Officer. I served 22 and a half years in the United States Navy and Marine Corps. One incident I remember in my day is the day that President Kennedy got shot. I happened to be 2 days out of Vietnam in Subic Bay, Philippines. I prided President Kennedy very much when he said, I quote, "Ask not what the country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." We as a military man respect that. What worries me is today, people, the first thing they want is me, and don't worry about defense. Defense is the first one that people want to cut. Defense is the reason you people are free today. One thing I really despise is NASA got cut. That was the things that NASA brought to us is amazing. Our way of life has improved quadruple and then some. So I just think we need to set back and take it a little bit easy on cutting defense.
Somebody brought up just one word that I wrote down here, and I wrote it different than Social Security and Medicare. They brought up health. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Caroll from Caroll, Iowa. I have an email written in. I've called many times your office. I guess my one question is that Affordable Care Act, when it was defined, President Obama, he appointed Dr. Berwick to interpret those rules that came down out of that act. I guess my question is, does Congress have any say over what Dr. Berwick does, or is he told word? Because what he's interpreting out of that Care Act is killing health care, and these people that probably aren't involved with home health, hospital, Medicaid plans, probably don't even realize what's going on. Is that they're losing some of their home care benefits because of all the paperwork that you people have put down on us. Every time we pick up somebody fraudulent, we get 2 more pieces of paper to fill out. This last one is to be filled out by the doctor before he gives us a referral for home care. And if anybody in here has ever used home care, it's very valuable. But I'll tell you what, if you get those doctors that are already underpaid for what they're doing, fill out this whole sheet of paper, which is already filled out by us, and I'm going to give you a copy of this, because I don't think Congress would ever look at this. See what they have the right to get a care for their patients at home. Terrible. Because this is a very duplication of what he's writing on this paper.
The answer to your question is everything that he does has to be within a law we wrote. The law is probably pretty general, so he has great authority to write regulations. And there is a complicated process for Congress to override some of those regulations, but quite frankly, it's seldom done. Overriding the regulation is seldom done, and that's one process. Another one, you put some language in an appropriation bill saying none of the money in this appropriation bill can be used to carry out such and such a regulation. That's probably more often used. But still, compared to the number of regulations, just the month of July, this administration put out 379 regulations. Just this year, the regulations for just this year, for the first part of this year, 48,000 pages of regulations. And the president's health care reform bill tells the secretary to, in 1,693 different places to write regulations. So you may read the 27-page bill, but you aren't going to know really what that bill does in the fullest until the regulations are written. And some of those regulations probably won't be all written until a long time after the bill goes into effect. So you may not. What was that? Raise your hand. I can't see who's speaking. Okay. I think you know I share your view because I told you about the 10 years of working with Senator Baucus, a Democrat on the committee that I served on. Let's go to who brought up, that was health. Who brought up Bush tax cut? Go ahead, sir.
DG Partridge, I have a business in Breda, a sub-S corporation. I wrote you a letter, a couple months ago, and I received a very quick response, which I appreciate. But I just didn't agree with your answers.
Okay. You know, a lot of people turn the letter over and write back how they disagree with it. Go ahead.
But I was pointing out that any business that's going to survive has to have income as well as watching their expenses. And it seems that this last session of Congress is pretty rancorous as far as any tax issues are concerned. It seemed to come out that for the benefit of the few and the expense of the many in the end result there. But I pointed out that the Bush tax cuts are what's causing part of our problem. Oil company subsidies and so forth. But, and one thing I'm taking issue with is the fact that I have a sub-S corporation. You said a sub-S corporation would be terribly hurt by a tax increase because it passes through, the profits pass through to the stock, to the owners and shareholders. But you don't have to take all that money out. You can defer it till better times. You can leave it in your company operation. And it's only 3 or 4%. And you said it would cause companies to forego health care, layoffs, equipment purchases. And 3 or 4%, we're consumer driven. 3 or 4% of the tax would help the company and the country a lot more than it would hurt my company, which is basically zero to hurt my company as far as I'm concerned. So we want to pay our fair share. And I think the Bush tax cuts should be allowed to expire. I think that you need to have revenue to have this country survive. There's no reason to cut Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid when the wealthy 4% can pay a little bit more money. 4% of the people in our country have as much wealth as the lower 50%. That's a heck of a difference, and that disparity continues to get worse. So I can't see where raising revenues is going to be detrimental to the economy of the country, and certainly not to sub-S corporation companies who know how to run their business.
On the last point you made, I'll use this chart to say, and I don't want to disagree with what you said about tax increases hurt. The point is they don't bring in the revenue that they're supposed to bring in. And I'll use this chart. This chart down here is the years from World War II till now. This chart, blue line, would tell you that the revenue that comes in from all federal taxes has been about 20%, but that line kind of averages out about 18.2%. Okay, in World War II and afterwards, we had a 90% tax bracket. Actually, it was 94%. When Kennedy got elected president, he saw the unwisdom, the bad wisdom of this. He reduced it down to 70. Reagan comes down and reduces it down to 50%. Reagan reduced it further to about 30%. Then Bush 1 lied when he said, read my lips, no new taxes. It got raised back to 40. And it's now at 35%. But you see, regardless of where the marginal tax rates are, it brings in about the same amount of money because for 2 reasons. One, somebody that's got the capability of doing it is going to find somebody legally not to pay taxes. And the second thing is, some people in this country don't have to work or invest if they don't want to. And when they figure at 94% that it ain't worth my giving 94% to the government and keeping 60% myself, you find activities that bring in about the same amount of money. So history just proves that I know common sense tells you that when you raise marginal tax rates, you ought to bring in more revenue, and you do bring in some more. And when you reduce them, you're going to lose money. But the common sense is that it doesn't bring in as much as projected. And when you reduce taxes, it stimulates activity that the loss isn't what anybody anticipated that it would be. 10 questions that people gave me at the beginning. I've got about 2 or 3 minutes. Can I ask somebody that hasn't asked a question or hasn't come in here with a group of people, or just as an individual, and maybe he's too bashful to ask a question? You want to be Ed?
Sure. Frank Hermanson from Caroll.
Yeah.
My question kind of relates to many of the discussions we've had. When you talk about the super committee, prior to this, there was another nonpartisan commission, I think it's called Simpson Bowles.
Yeah.
Why have we just ignored their recommendations?
Okay, the reason is this. First of all, they haven't been ignored because there's a bipartisan group of 6, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, Coburn and Chambliss and Conrad. I won't think of all 6 of them right now. But they followed on that to a great extent. Not exactly the way the Simpson Bowles did it, but to a great extent, they worked the last 6 or 8 months trying to get this stuff done in a bipartisan way, just in the Senate, not in the House. And the other one is because the president himself has never said that he backed the Simpson Bowles commission that he appointed. They reported on December 5th, and he's never said that their recommendations are what we ought to be doing. And so, if the president doesn't do it, then you've got 53 Democrats, well, not all 53, but a good share of the Democrats probably don't want to do it. And there's a lot of things in it that Republicans would like to do, because several Republicans that were appointed to the commission voted for it, as well as Simpson, who's a former Republican. Okay, one last question from somebody else that hasn't asked a question. Free trade agreements, where are they at? Let me write that down first. They'll be up in the Senate within the next, sometime during the month of September. Probably will all take it will pass because the president's satisfied now that what he wanted on trade adjustment assistance, which is a program for people that can come unemployed because of trade, that that's the way he wanted it. Well, thank you all very much for coming.
About the loopholes, man. These are ridiculous. You got to make Wall Street pay, man. That could solve a significant part of the problem. Make Wall Street pay for shares. Ridiculous. Don't put it on the backs of my 89-year-old mother or my 86-year-old man. That's unfair.
With Senator Grassley. Sorry. Why are you willing to support the bill? Because one from our trip. Hi, how are you?
Thank you. How are you? Thank you.
Oh yes.
I'll give you an email address.
Okay. DC working for Senator from New Orleans.
Senator.
Yes, you're right.
Yes.
Working for Bitter. Yeah. Anyway, I'm so glad that you
Senator
Grassley.
This old lady wants to talk to you for 2 minutes. This old girl wants to talk.
Where is the news media at, and where's your counterpart?
Senator Grassley, we can walk with you, but there's an old woman who has a question.
Senator Grassley.
That's only fair.
I'm just with you.
How are you?
Talk to you today.
This is the news media. Get the fuck out of my way.
Senator, will you just answer her question? It'll take a minute.
Well, I went.
Senator Grassley, question just 1 minute. We'll have
I represent Senator Grassley.
Just one moment.
Sir, you can push and curse, but I'm not doing that to you.
I didn't interrupt your time. This is press time.
Sir, one of us is polite. That's not you.
In the legislature, back. 1965. 1965, we worked with the legislature.
legislature.
That's fine. That's fine. We can wait.
Take it away,
I was going to just
Apologize to What press is in there?
I don't know, I'm not a press person. So
That's not a press person, was it?
and so they scheduled press time. And I don't really, you don't tell me like which person.
And I don't believe the person who pushed me is on his
I
staff.
have something He's not on his staff.
I
would Thank God.
promise me to keep
No, what I'm saying is they line up in DC.
Social Security.
Yeah, so all I have on my schedule, like all on our schedule.
This is an email address.
She probably maybe has names. I'm
Yeah,
not sure.
I'd like that.
I think the senator would
But you can just
I don't know.
feel free to ask him.
Are you a staffer with Grassley too?
They were at Bill said.
Yes, I'm a
All I recommend is that you have a microphone or something at these things so people can hear.
That's a good-
Basically, most of us over 65 can't hear anyway.
Yeah, you had a good question. It should have been louder.
Okay. Because we missed a whole lot of it.
I do appreciate you telling us. And
You're not Rodney, are you?
I am not Rodney. Rodney's much more handsome than me.
Oh, tell Rodney hi.
I will.
You just remind me. All right. All right, thanks. Hi. Just curious, the individual who shoved me the first time, he's not on Senator Grassley's staff, correct?
He's a
That's fine. Do you know what press organization he's with? Is there a way I can find out or get his press representative? I don't think that gentleman wanted to talk to me, to be quite frank. Okay. Your name then?
I heard what you said. They ought to work together, shouldn't they? That's no shit. Way to go.
Do you want to do that? It's just, yeah. If you want to do that, we can.
We want to ask him to sign his pledge to not cut Social Security.
I think we'll just wait.
Our meeting goes right over here. This goes to outside. No. Front door is the only way is just straight through. But if we go, we can go off into an area where they shouldn't follow us. I mean, I'll watch it so they don't follow you, but you want to move it. When you end up there, you're going to have to go in the building. So the alternative is move the car. Oh, yeah, like you might. Big time.
Can you help us when Senator Grassley comes out that we get a
We have got to get to the next town hall meeting.
But let's be realistic. We have a question we'd like to ask. It would take us 3 minutes of asking him to ask it versus 1 minute of just letting us ask it. I'd like to help you guys, but we feel like we have a right to ask a question.
Yeah.
That's our senator. I'm not going to see him for a long time. You know that.
Well, and that's why he does offer up, staff and more than offer.
I'm just asking you, practically speaking, we want to ask this question. It's going to take us a lot longer than slowing Senator Grassley down and asking him to ask a question we have the right to ask. Unless you can just help us give a minute, 1 minute, 60 seconds of his time. It seems to me that's...
Sir, it's press time right now.
Okay, but it's citizen time after that.
But it's citizen time.
1 minute.
That's why Senator has been at everything.
We really...
The host. Here. No, I grew up in Northeast. Oh really? Actually, I'm from his hometown. I'm from Butler. Being the hostess, I feel kind of responsible.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, but not here, not just here. We have 24 homes in the community, and we have a number of individuals that get vocational services from us and also live in their own home. We have about 64 people who live here in the homes. Okay, and you are? I've not met you when I was up there in June.
Yeah, you would. That's what everyone
Rodney in person.
I just got back, so, yeah, no, I'm going to be
So along there, I know you're off too.
Well,
He was president.
yeah. These are new membership. I was right here in the sheet that I know what's happening.
Don't have to keep. Since you don't have the kids, you can't have the
It's also the beauty of our democracy, you know. We're gonna disagree, that's all right. And he's a good sport, you know, letting us set the agenda, that's good. But that doesn't, you know, town hall meetings are one of the most important. That's okay, we got that now.
And he has an obligation to the next group.
Follow what you want to, we don't have a corporate debt. Probably been made to try and prove it, is always going to have to do it in place for next month. Is that where you get your steel shots? I've heard they sold. He came to I'll never forget that. Anyway, all right. Good job. See you in Denison. We're going there next year.